Thank you for watching this presentation on why cycles matter in business. So we know that in the natural world, things proceed according to cycles or life cycles. Here's an example of the seasonal life cycle with autumn on the left, going into that period of dormancy of winter, and then we emerge in spring with growth and rebirth, and then summer happens and you plateau, and the cycle repeats itself. We also know that as human beings, we go through a life cycle from birth to infancy to maturity and eventually back ashes to ashes to death. And here's an example of another life form, an insect, a butterfly, and the life cycle that it goes through. And what's interesting about the butterfly is that it actually goes through two very distinct forms during the life cycle, from that caterpillar phase to the butterfly. So let's take a look at these cycles, and this is what we call a sigmoid curve. Imagine, if you will, you sort of have this S curve lying on its side. And when we look at the cycle, it follows mathematical formula, and it also has three phases that we think about it. In the first phase, we are in the learning phase. The middle phase is the growth phase. Then you hit this plateau before the curve begins to go down again, and this is called the decline phase. So what's happening at each of these phases? Now, in the learning phase, you're investing a lot of time and energy. And if we think about a business, you're testing your ideas, testing the market, seeing what resonates, what fits. And there's not much to show for your effort. So you're learning and investing time, but you can see that the slope is in this kind of decline phase. Now, in the growth phase, things move from a period of that quiet time to fast. Things are moving quickly. You're growing. There's a lot of energy and passion, and every day you're seeing improved revenue and growth. Now, of course, it doesn't follow a straight uphill climb. There's often a few peaks and valleys along the way, but the general trend is uphill growth. Then we get over here to the far side of growth, where you start to have what we call maturity, where there's kind of the passion and the intensity starting to cool off. You're starting to coast, get comfortable. And then invariably what happens is you move into the decline phase, and that product or service is superseded or obsoleted, and energy and morale in the business often declines. So let's take a little closer look at the business cycles. And there are some, say, potholes or traps that are known and that are important to recognize and work to avoid. Now, the first one here is the honeymoon trap. This is that early stage. You've just launched your business. Your friends and family and neighbors are buying it. It seems really easy. But what's important to recognize is that this is that honeymoon phase, and they're still learning to happen. And that curve is going to continue to decline. A lot more energy and a lot less coming out. You're not necessarily seeing revenue yet. And it's really important in this learning phase to maybe save some of the money you are earning and invest it in making sure that you are testing the right things and really figuring out what it's going to take to be successful in that business. Because if you don't do that, the next thing happens is really what we call being 3 feet from gold. And this is when business owners give up and they switch. You know, they've invested time and energy, they haven't seen the growth that they were expecting, and they quit and they start over again. And in fact, a lot of business owners are always in this area. They're always in the learning phase because they give up too quickly before that growth phase resumes or actually starts to take off. Now, in the early phase of growth, one of the things that happens is what's called the founder's trap. And everything is going really fast, and you're really time constrained. And maybe you've hired a few people in your business, but it's really all you can do to manage the people and all the business or clients that you have. And what has to happen at this phase is businesses need to learn to scale. And that often means having systems and processes that will allow you to duplicate some of the work that you're doing or easily systematize them so that they can be repeatable and you can scale and grow. Next, in the latter part of growth is the Midas trap, where everything you touch turns to gold. And it's a great feeling. It's a wonderful time in a business. But what happens is sometimes you don't take note of what else is happening around you. You're so comfortable and happy with what's happening and your successes, you're maybe not paying attention to the outside world. And we could look at a company like Blockbuster Video several years ago when home entertainment was really taking off. You know, they had all of the first-run movies, and people would come to the store, pick out what they wanted to watch, and go home. And Blockbuster built lots of stores. They were everywhere, and things were great. They were really in that high growth phase. But one of the things that they probably fell into, what's known as the denial trap. There was this other competitor on the horizon called Netflix who would send you videos by mail, and perhaps Blockbuster thought, well, who would want to wait 2 days to get a video in the mail when you could come to our store and get it immediately? Well, we all know what happened. Blockbuster Video no longer exists, and Netflix is really a huge dominant player in the marketplace. So what we have to learn to do in business is to take advantage of what we call this opportunity phase. And you have to start to reinvent the business and start a new sigmoid curve. So if you look here on the right side where these 2 points meet, if you wait to reinvent yourself and think about learning new things until the business is in decline, where there's less revenue, less energy, it's kind of an unhappy time in a business and becomes a time of desperation, it's very hard to dig yourself out of that hole and change things. But if you go over here when you're still in that energy, high revenue position and you think, aha, how do we reinvent ourselves? That's really an important time to do it, and that's the best time to do it. But that can also be a hard thing to do. I mean, if you're growing tremendously and you go to your board of directors or your advisors and you say, hey, we have to come up with a new way of doing business because we're growing so rapidly, they're going to say, well, why would you change what's happening? We don't want to fix what's not broke, right? Well, it's really important that we do so. We're going to zoom in a little bit on these 2 curves that are overlapping. So here's your first curve. What you have to learn to do is you have to start a new learning curve while the other curve is still in existence. So your current growth model is happening and you're growing, but you have to recognize that all businesses are going to go through this cycle and all products will. So you must be always investing while you've got that revenue and energy, investing money, testing things, trying new things, always learning so that you can take advantage of that opportunity phase. And what's really difficult, and if we look at the butterfly metaphor, you know, what was working in the growth phase here for the caterpillar who's crawling along a plant and eating leaves is very different than what's going to be successful over here when you need to fly from flower to flower. So 2 really different forms, but you must make the kind of dramatic change we see here in order to succeed long term. Ultimately, what you really want to do is you want to have this continuous reinvention of the business where you're going through one curve and you're kind of, as that starts to crest, you're starting to ride the next wave, if you will, and get on that next growth curve. So that's the business cycle, and the question I have is, where are you or your team or your business on the sigmoid curve? Are you somewhere in early growth? It's important to also know that you have your team in the same place. If you have a lot of your team members that are in early learning phase and you're trying to grow rapidly, well, that's definitely going to be a constraint. So it's important to recognize where the business is, where the team is, and make adjustments to get as many pieces aligned as possible. So what's most important is that you recognize where you are on the curve. The different stages or phases of the business life cycle require different types of activities, so it's important to know where you are. You have to constantly monitor and measure what's happening in the business and also what's happening in the environment and outside world and the marketplace. It's really important that you adopt a mindset of culture and continuous improvement. Imagine that that plateau is always on the horizon. In fact, it's just around the corner. So you've got to be thinking of new ways to improve what's happening and switch your business model or how you get customers, whatever it is, so that you can capture that next curve. And the final thing you have to do is you have to have the courage to implement change. You know, it's hard when things are going well to make a change, but you must recognize that every business goes through cycles, and it's important that you are keeping things fresh and changing your model and testing your theories in the status quo. So where does coaching fit in? So one of the things that we do as coaches is we really help our clients gain clarity around where they are on the business curve, and also just what they want to do with their business, and then help them create a strategy and plan to get them to where they want to go. Help them implement systems and processes so they can scale. And then, of course, you have to have personal development, whether that is for the leader in the business or the people in the business. Business coaches help people and business owners along all of these steps of the pathway. So thank you very much for your time. If you'd like to contact me further, please connect with me through email or the website, or give me a call. Thank you so much.